Okay. Hi everyone, and thank you for coming to the first event of our Women in Power to Empower series. It is my absolute delight to be hosting this event with Janette, who I will introduce in a minute. But first, just to set the scene, because today we're talking about women in power, and although not many of you will need a reason as to why we're talking about this, the reason we're talking about it at this particular moment in history is because there are sources that are revealing statistics, for example, The Guardian, that are saying things like only 8% of the UK's top companies are led by women. And since we're here to talk politically, only 34% of the House of Commons are led by women. So why is that happening? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to split the conversation into two parts. For the first part, we'll be talking to our panellists and about the experiences that led her to where she is now. We have our lovely Janette here with us today, who is the first woman leader of the Wirral Council in 29 years and the Deputy Metro Mayor of Liverpool. And then for the second part of the conversation, we'll be looking at the challenges that persist for women and how we can envision a different future. So, first of all, let's get into asking the questions. Could you please talk us through, Janette, what was it that prompted your engagement in politics? Was it a particular experience or an innate sense of social injustice that triggered you?
Both. Well, firstly, thank you for asking me to come along. It's always lovely to come along to Wirral Young Labour events. And just to answer that, it was both really, Liv. It was when I was 8, my dad died, which meant my mum brought me up and my brother. And she was a really, really strong woman. And she was a feminist and a socialist, still is. She is a feminist and a socialist. And she always pushed me to do the best that I could. And my granddad, which was her dad, was a trades unionist, and he was shop steward of the Boilermakers Union in Camelairds. So he came from a very strongly political family, but one that was just driven by social justice, really, and fairness. I think politics on a daily basis, but not necessarily with a large P. Although my granddad would have had a hairy fit if he thought we ever would have voted anyone but Labour. But it was generally how we lived our lives and what I was taught by my mum and grandparents. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter 30 years ago, some really insidious policy came through the Thatcher government called the poll tax, which was so unfair. I don't think there's been, well, there has since. I want to say I don't think there's been a government I've hated more, but actually I do, this current one. But at the time, the poll tax was set to replace council tax. Well, it was rates then. They were called rates. And basically Thatcher wanted to change from one payment for each household building to each person who lived in that house had to pay the same amount, which disadvantaged larger families, poorer families, and certainly advantaged those that had big houses that maybe lived on their own or were just a couple. And it was so unfair. And it was trialled in Scotland, where lots of very unfair Tory policies tend to be trialled in. And I went on a poll tax march in 1991 when I was pregnant with Lauren, my daughter. It was, if anyone wants to Google it, if they don't know about it already, it was historic. And actually it changed that policy. It made Thatcher do a U-turn. And that's when I was already political before then, but that really did kind of light my fire then. So both really upbringing and specific political events. I think I was a teenager under the Thatcher government, and I don't think many people who were under that government of any age that I know of have come out of that, other than the socialists that we are.
Thank you. So another question that was asked by a member of the audience was, has it been difficult being the first woman leader of the council in 29 years? And I mean, I hope you don't mind me bringing up this traumatic experience, but you actually came off of social media because of the particularly vitriolic abuse that you were receiving by that medium. And I wanted to know, how was it to experience that? Because that's not really something that you get told when you go into being a leader, especially as a woman. And I was wondering if you could answer that.
Yeah, well, you said especially as a woman. I think, in all honesty, the personal stuff I don't recall my male counterparts getting. They might have had abuse, general abuse, but the personalised nastiness around appearance, women always get appearance. Men feel that unless they find you attractive, then you're of no worth. Some men do, not all, of course, particularly ones that are here tonight. But that's how a lot of men view women. When they're young, they have to be sort of sexually attractive. As we sort of progress into middle age, and we're irrelevant often. And if we're in leadership positions and passionate and strong women, then we're a problem for them. So when I became leader, it was only 13 months ago. It does seem like a lot longer. When I became leader, within 10 days, the government had put the city region into tier 3 lockdown, and we were the first part of the country to go into that. So I had the backlash from that, from mainly men, not always, but mainly men who, I came off social media because of that. They would think nothing of leaving voicemails on the phone, which was a bit daft because, like, I've got your number. Anyway, but they would leave their name sometimes as well, and then tell me how dreadful I was and how I should resign, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that it's really difficult for women. I'm not going to lie on that front. And I've got friends who are leaders in other councils, and we all speak and we all say the same thing, that there's an element of what women have to put up with that men don't, and that manifests itself in insults, in rape jokes, in intimidation. So that was a real challenge for me then, and kind of still is to an extent, but I think I've just had to learn to toughen up and actually not go on social media as much, because it kind of is true, that cliche about never read anything about yourself. And it's probably a pretty decent way to live at the moment, until we can get a grip of our social media and some of the awful things that people put on there. It's not worth the stress. What people who do that don't realise is I'm a human being, and I've got a family who can read that. I've got a daughter, and I've got a mum who's got herself on Facebook, but she gets really, upset by that too. So undoubtedly, women do face it, and a different kind of abuse. So there is difficulties in being a female leader, but there are also real rewards. And so I would never want to put anyone off going for leadership positions in any walk of life, but particularly political, because the rewards you get and the satisfaction, do outweigh the nastiness.
So we're now at the second half of our event, where we'll be now discussing how we can empower women. And what we really want to know is, why is there a massive gap between men and women participating in politics? So I have a question for you, which was, do you think that the lack of women leaders in politics is due to the gender-specific behaviours that are assumed of women? I mean, for example, the COVID government poster that's just shown women, like, performing mundane tasks around the home. Like, is that really what women think, that they can't dabble in a political world that's made for men?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've mentioned this before. I kind of came in as obviously a backbencher, then went into a role of chair, then cabinet and deputy leader, and then leader. But there's always an implied, maybe not even implied, I mean, it's sometimes quite obvious, assumption that women are better off in supportive roles. So, group secretary, deputy leader, maybe, be at the side of the leader, sort of that's the way that women are viewed, because it reverts back to the gender stereotype of a woman being a nurturer and there to support their family, and the good wife and girlfriend who steps back to let their partner's careers flourish. And of course that stems from the kind of old-fashioned, gender roles that we had in the nuclear family coming from the 50s, where women were very much there to stay at home, bring the kids up and let the husband go out and earn money. And it was inconceivable back then that a woman's career would ever take precedent over her male partners. And I think you're absolutely right in that respect. Women are just not viewed as natural leaders. I think there's structural misogyny there that ascribes certain traits to women that are not viewed as traditionally leadership traits desired. So, the traditional model of a male leader is very much aggressive, non-compromising, no weaknesses, sort of. That's the model that's trotted out, and the softer skills that women are said to have are relegated to kind of secondary ones. So we've only got to look across New Zealand, haven't we, to see who one of the most inspiring leaders is in the world at the minute, if not the most inspiring at that level, to see that those skills are absolutely what we want in our leaders. I've just completed a leadership academy with the local government association, and we very much looked at this. And one of the things that came through really strongly was that people want to see that side in a leader. And one of the things that men do very well to patronize us is to say, oh, you're very passionate, aren't you? That's just a byword for emotional or overly emotional or not measured or not cerebral, and it's used in a derogatory way but dressed up as a compliment. And so when a woman gets kind of upset at an issue, it's put down to overly emotional. But when a man does it, you can see the passion in his voice. And so we've got all of that to battle with. So I think you're absolutely right. It's around the traditional role that's been carved out for women throughout the ages, and whether or not people think that that's the appropriate kind of skill set to be a leader. And being a woman leader is all about changing that view, that sort of view of leaders. I mean, we've only got to look at Boris Johnson. Do we really want him? Apart from the fact that his politics are reprehensible, as a person he is too. And so, when I look across Parliament, some of the best people we have in there are women. Absolutely are. On our benches, there's so many. I'm scared of missing one out if I start to mention them all, but we've certainly got amazing women on Wirral as our MPs, for sure. So I think it's about challenging the stereotypical view of what a leader should be, and that is rooted in misogyny.
I was recently watching a Q&A that was with Mary Beard, and they were talking about how a lot of the time an environment is mainly male dominated, and I was wondering if you thought, because with possibly, I'm just saying with LGBT communities, I'm generalizing here, I'm not being specific, but a lot of the time an LGBT member is with another LGBT member, like quite a lot of their time is spent and they're in an environment where they're with that person. Whereas with women, we're going from a workplace that's male dominated, maybe spending a bit of time with other women and fighting for our cause, but then we'll go back home, and if you're heterosexual, for example, if you have a husband, you'll be in that environment where it's male dominated. And I wondered if you thought that could be what's like holding back gender equality progress.
I think so. And I think, I guess really you've only got to look at politics, and I think you can see the reason why a lot of people aren't attracted to it, particularly women, because of the machismo that's in politics now, but has always been. I mean, it's enough to put most people off, if I'm being honest. You've got local politics, which is really tough. I mean, I don't have to go into the situation in Wirral. Well, that's kind of replicated up and down the country, particularly Labour councils that have really struggled and had the funding slashed by this government. It's difficult, it's male dominated, it's combative. So I would imagine a lot of people, a lot of young women would say, do I really want that aggro? You know, and then there's the process they have to go to get there. And you know, we absolutely have to keep our all-woman shortlist, because the argument that we will choose the best candidate regardless is great in theory, but in reality, the best candidate more often than not is a man, and I don't believe on the balance of probabilities that stacks up. So I think that, you know, if young women are in an environment in the daytime, as you say, and then a family environment that's male dominated, it could put them off. Well, that's why they need to get into the Labour or just Labour branches and start to meet other women, because I think politics is really, it's really unique, and we're all here, aren't we, because we share that passion. We absolutely share that passion, and if you don't share that passion, politics is not the game for you at the minute. It really isn't. It's, you know, it's something that you are driven to do, and I know that you all are, because I know you all. So and I think as a woman you will get that support. If you decide it's what you want to do, you will get it.
One question that's been asked by a student who wants to go read politics at uni was, what advice would you give to young women hoping to start a career in politics regarding maintaining an effective work-personal life balance?
Yeah, I wrote a few things down here because that's quite difficult, because work-life balance, I'm not sure what that is anymore, but that's me at my level, and that's a conscious decision I've made. So work-life balance can be hard. If you're starting out in politics, you should be okay. It's once you start thinking about becoming a councillor and then your workload increases. What I would say is, if it's really what you love and you want to do, you just do find a way, because you're driven to do it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know, as you get more involved in politics and you get a position of a councillor and then maybe some additional responsibilities on top of that, you know, you've always got to try and maintain that work-life balance. But I think most people I know have acknowledged that sometimes that slips a little bit, but that's okay, because they're driven by politics. I'm lucky because my daughter's now grown up, so I haven't got that issue as much. I do know colleagues of mine that have got younger families do struggle with that, but they seem to cope because they are so driven by it. So what I would say was, if it's what you want to do, it will kind of supersede everything else, and you will find that. The other advice would be to young women who want to go into politics, as in beyond the academic sort of setting and actually involved in politics, is don't allow other people to define you. So keep hold of that passion. Because what tends to happen is you can lose it if you're not careful, because it's so rough. Politics can be rough, and the temptation to maybe think, oh, do you know what, I'm not going to say that, or I'm maybe not going to attach myself to that cause, or stick my head above the parapet. I mean, sometimes we all do that because that's just self-preservation, but don't lose that. Don't lose the very thing that pushed you into politics, because now more than ever, I think Labour is on the cusp. You know, we've seen the polls. Hooray, at last. Things are starting to turn, and people are starting to see this government for what they are. And they are just a gang of charlatans, but they're looking to us. They're looking for authenticity and belief and that real drive to make this society a more socially just one. And they need us to do that. And so the Labour Party has to be for the people who are committed to doing that. So I would say to young women, just get involved. You know what? They will love it. If they've got a supportive network, they will love it. But don't feel they've got to bend themselves into an acceptable form of what other people think they should be. Because some of the best female politicians are those ones you know, like Jess and, you know, Angela and Ali, that just don't back down and do say it as it is, because that's what us as women want in our female politicians, and men do too, in the main.
So as we bring the event to a close, I do have one final question for you. What one thing would you like the audience to take away from today's event? One thing that they can do that will make a difference?
Okay, so I jotted a few things down. It might be a bit cheating here, but don't lose the fire in your belly. Don't lose it. You're all here because you're really committed to the Labour Party and to making things better for people. Don't lose that, because once you lose that, you've lost your drive then, haven't you? And don't let, for young women, don't let men define you. And also, just on that, make sure that you look after other women as well, because it's only when we're divided amongst ourselves that we'll get beaten. So I would say, look after each other, respect each other, and don't let men define your existence.
Thank you so much, Janette.
Is that okay?
I definitely will take that on, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on, because you really are such an inspiration to me. It's been an honour to sit with you and listen to you.
Oh no, it's honestly, any time. It's a real pleasure. It's really nice to see like the men here as well, actually. The young men here who are like definitely tomorrow's kind of politicians, as well as young women, you know. So it's nice to have a male audience, guys. Can't see any of you anyway.
I'm gonna stop the recording.